This is the first of the short sessions that we have, and as Graham suggested it, we thought that he should get the pleasure of going first. So as you know, this one is about affordability, which means different things to different people. So it'll be interesting to see what the views are. Very short sessions. I hope you've got a cup of coffee. 15 minutes maximum talking from Graham, and then 15 minutes for your questions. So we are recording this session, so we can put them up on our website. So off you go, Graham. Thanks very much. And if everyone could mute, please, and put your hand up if you want to ask a question. Okay, Graham.
Thank you, Wesley. Thanks very much. Just checking that everybody can hear me and everybody can see the TPAS logo. That's great. Okay, well, thanks everybody for coming for this short webinar from TPAS. As Wesley said, the idea is that this is a very short core session, and you can stay around for questions afterwards if you want to. But if you haven't got that spare time, then you can just go as soon as the main presentation is over. We're going to be starting from a position of assuming you have no knowledge of this subject. So we'll be building it up from the basics. So first of all, to introduce myself to those of you who don't know me, I'm Graham Wilson, and I'm presenting this session today on rent and affordability. I've been told the audience today is composed of tenants and staff working in housing. Rents and affordability is quite a technical subject. I'm going to assume that you have no knowledge, and I'll start from the basics. And obviously the first and most basic question this one is first of all, what does affordability mean anyway? Well, we all know at a common sense level what it means to be able to afford something. It means that you have the money to be able to pay for it. But when we're talking about rent, unfortunately, it gets a little bit more complicated than that. Landlords can define affordability in a number of different ways. And there's three examples up there on the screen. First of all, one way of defining it is looking at the rent a tenant pays as a percentage of that tenant's income. A second way is the income a tenant has left over to spend on everything else they have to spend after they've paid their rent. Or a third way is adding a bit more on to that, looking at the income that a tenant has left after paying the rent, and then comparing that to a minimum income standard, something like the level of universal credit or the minimum wage or a minimum income standard, which is published and reviewed each year by somebody like the Joseph Rowntree Foundation, the sort of income that you need for a decent quality of life. So if your landlord says that their rents are affordable, you need to ask how they are defining affordability, because everybody's income and spending is different. Everyone's experience of an affordable rent will be different. So the questions that you need to ask your landlord are, first of all, how are they measuring income? Are they actually taking real income figures from an income survey of their tenants? Or are they using published figures like the annual survey of household earnings or the minimum wage levels, or are they using living wage levels? And secondly, if they're talking about a percentage measure of affordability, you need to ask what percentage they're taking as being the upper limit of affordability. And usually this is around 25% to 30% really being regarded as the upper limit. Nothing much happens in housing without the Scottish Housing Regulator having a view on that question. So here, what does the regulator expect landlords to be doing about affordability? Well, first of all, the regulator doesn't define affordability, and the regulator doesn't actually collect any income from landlords about affordability. They do collect information on rent levels and rent increases each year from landlords in the annual return on the charter that each landlord has to make. And the regulator expects all landlords to comply with financial standard number 3, which is part of the annual assurance statement. This statement says that the landlord manages its resources and maintains rents at a level that tenants can afford to pay. And the regulator will expect the landlord to have evidence that their rents are affordable now and will stay affordable into the future. And they also expect landlords to be having a discussion or dialogue with their tenants on the level of rent increases every year round about the time of the rent review. So if landlords have to know what affordability is, how can they measure affordability to show that their rents are affordable to their tenants? Well, increasingly, landlords are using affordability calculators, gathering reliable information about incomes and benefits and updating that information each year is a lot of work. Organisations like the Scottish Federation of Housing Associations and Housemark have prepared affordability calculators, and landlords have access to them, which will enable the landlord to show what type of household and what type of property are generating the greatest challenges for the tenants in terms of affordability. Moving on to the question of consultation, the landlord must consult their tenants each year about their proposed rent increases. And obviously, if that's going to be successful, they want to maximise participation in that annual exercise. So levels of participation vary quite a lot. Some research done by the regulator showed that these went up to about 15% at a good level of participation. It's obviously good practice for the landlord to ask tenants how they want to get information and then to provide it in that way. And this obviously applies even more so to hard to reach groups who have communication needs or language difficulties. And this obviously helps to make consultation meaningful for those groups. Secondly, traditional information and consultation are still valued very much. People like letters, they like newsletters. And even though this year has been a year like no other year, with face-to-face meetings and door knocking and that type of thing impossible to carry out, some landlords have tried to compensate for that with online meetings and using video conferencing services. And it'll be very interesting to see when the dust settles on the rent consultation exercises for 21-22, just how effective these things have been and how many people have got involved in these new ways of participating, and whether landlords are going to be carrying on with these into the future. But one lesson does come forward very clearly, is that successful consultation is a method which engages directly with tenants. It's really not enough to put information out there and wait for people to come back to you. So contacting people directly and actively engaging with them rather than simply offering the opportunity is the one that gets the highest level of participation. There are obviously new ways like social media, text messages and online surveys. There have never been more technology solutions available to landlords, but it's how they use them and how they engage with tenants which will determine whether these are effective or not. Moving on then, so here's some points about the trends in affordability, what's happening in affordability now and what's happening into the future. And this is based on a survey the regulator has done with the National Housing Panel. And these relate to real tenants' experience of paying real rents. It's important to remember that even though rents may be affordable in an affordability calculation, when real tenants actually have to pay real rents, their experience can be very different. In 2020, 51% of tenants reported they had difficulty in affording their rent, and this had gone up by 14% from the last time that survey was done in 2019. Tenants are most likely to have difficulty paying their rent if they don't get housing benefit or universal credit, or if they spend more than 25% of their income on paying the rent. So that links back to what we were talking about a moment ago, that upper threshold on what's affordable to tenants. Once you start to go above 25%, you have an increasing level of difficulty in paying the rent. And finally, even if tenants can pay the rent now, people are worried about the future. 70% of people are saying they have concern about being able to afford to pay their rent in the future, and this had gone up from 58% last year. So people are worried about future affordability, even if the rents are affordable to them now. When tenants were asked what makes it difficult for you to afford to pay the rent, what is the other major strain on your finance and your budget, one issue that came out very strongly was heating and fuel costs. So investment in insulation and affordable heating systems is one of the best ways that landlords can help to make their homes affordable for their tenants to live in, as well as keeping rents low, obviously. So finally, some sum-up questions. Things to remember. How is your landlord defining affordability? What measures of affordability are they using? And are these measures set out in their rental policy? Secondly, what evidence does your landlord have to show that their rents are affordable now and that they're going to be affordable into the future? The days of assuming that you can just put on inflation plus 1% rent increases are over. When your landlord is reaching out to bring tenants into the consultation process, what techniques are they using and how are they actually engaging with people? Even if rents are affordable on paper, tenants will find it difficult to pay, so income maximisation and benefits advice are vital services. And finally, investment in improving the energy efficiency of homes improves affordability by helping tenants' budgets. So that's the end of my presentation. Thanks for listening. And I think now we'll have some opportunity to ask questions and have some discussion points.
Thanks, Graham. Do you want to stop sharing your screen and we can see if anybody's got their hands up? Thanks for that, Graham. Okay, that's good. I should be back with you. That's great. Yep. Yeah, good. That's great. Any questions, anybody? You're all being shy. Any questions? Can I ask then, I mean, for those of you who are tenants who are participating today, what's been your own experience for the information you've been getting from landlords? Have they been showing you evidence of affordability? Have they been making this information available to you? I see somebody shaking their head. Oh, there's Moira got her hand up. Graham, Moira, do you want to unmute? You're muted, Moira. You're muted, Moira. You're still on mute, Moira.
No, not now.
Oh, hey. That's good.
Well, I heard about the affordability tools at a TPAS conference. So that must have been 2 years ago. And we, in our housing advisory group, we mentioned this to the Stirling Council and asked them if they would look at affordability and also could do so by using the affordability tool. Now this year, once again, they were late starting the consultation, but when we did get it, we did ask the question about affordability tool again, and they said they had been looking into it. We've just got a paper for the Housing Advisory Group, which is on this Friday, and it's on the result of their rent consultation. And lo and behold, they include information on the rent affordability tool, which I'm going to be discussing with Graham tomorrow, hopefully.
That's right, yeah.
Yes. From both myself and Hugh McClung have been pushing for rent affordability to be taken into consideration, and it looks like they are at last doing it. So.
Yes, that's right, Moira. It would have been useful if that information had been made available at the beginning of this process rather than at the end. But as you say, we've kind of got there eventually.
Can I just say, Graham, I think I had a discussion yesterday with the Scottish Government and talking about tenants and rent affordability, and I think one of the things, it is really difficult to pin down. And I think you've absolutely got the point right. You need to speak to your landlord about what's appropriate in your area, because trying to look at Scotland as a whole, the economy of Scotland is so varied, and you can have two housing associations, one in one local authority area and one in another local authority area, that are exactly the same size, about the same style, about the same age, but the economies are different. And you might find that if you think about, like, John's here from the Western Isles, so the economy in the Western Isles would be very different from the economy in Stirling or Edinburgh. So I think it is, you've made a great point there about trying to make sure it's about you and your landlord, and about you and your landlord and affordability. Sorry, I see Lisa's got her hand up there.
Yes, go ahead, Lisa.
Hi, Graham. I was just wondering if it should be something that maybe the tenants maybe to consider, if the regulator would consider making it part of their legal requirements for a landlord to use a tool guide, because as Moira says, when I was there as well at Stirling, it was brought up a couple of times, and I think I attended a Scottish House Network meeting as well, and majority of landlords there were using affordability tools. And it is a good way to kind of see what your tenant's income is. I mean, some tenants' incomes, a lot of them will be on benefits, other ones, a lot of them will be working. But given the circumstances with COVID, there'll be a lot of people maybe now unemployed that wasn't unemployed last year. So their income has obviously changed. So do you think it's something that the regulator should maybe make a rule that landlords look and use an affordability tool?
If you're asking me for my opinion, my answer is yes, that landlords clearly should. I mean, the cynic in me says that the regulator won't actually set out a definition of affordability, really, because it's too prickly a thistle to grab hold of, and they will always they'll pass that back to landlords and say, well, you really need to discuss that with yourselves. You need to negotiate that with your tenants, rather than us say, well, it's this or it's that. But yes, you're absolutely right. I do think they should be setting out just over in their rent policy what their definition of affordability is. And to go back to the point that Moira made a moment ago in relation to Stirling, and sorry if this is becoming a bit of a Stirling-based discussion. Please feel free to chip in if you're not from Stirling. Stirling is using a definition of affordability to calculate affordability, a definition of income to calculate affordability that I don't think has actually been endorsed, so to speak. They've just chosen it now, quite late in the day. So, I think they need to be more upfront about that.
Lisa?
No, sorry, I was just putting my hand down, Leslie.
Okay, so popped up again. Oh, there's Tamar. You're on mute, Tamar. You need to take yourself off mute. Nope, still on mute. Try talking. No, you're still muted, Tamar. Do you want to put it in the chat? No.
Can I unmute?
No.
Right.
No, I think it's because we're not all muted, okay. So no.
Sorry, Tamar, you seem to be having some IT problems. If you okay, thanks a lot for that. And Ron, you have your hand up.
Yes, yes. I appreciate. I've had these discussions before about what affordability means, and after a few minutes, your head hurts. You know, you can't. you just can't get around it. I want to give you an example, and it's mine. According to my figures, my rent is 43% of my income. I'm not on benefits. I don't get anything extra, but I have surplus at the end of the year. So, in one view, I can afford it. With other view, I shouldn't be able to afford it. So it's so difficult to get this definition right, isn't it?
Yeah, well, yes. I mean that's right. As I said in the presentation, I think everyone's individual experience of affordability will be different, and it may very well be different for single people who maybe have more flexibility than maybe families who have more demands on their budget and maybe find it more difficult to plan their expenditure. Yeah. That's right. I think the pressure on affordability is always going to be greatest for families on low incomes.
Of course. Yeah. I mean, the example is it's only me. You know.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So
I think Tamar's managed to get her
self off mute.
Yeah. Did you want to say anything else, Ron? I didn't want to cut you off there, but are you okay with that?
Yes.
It's a good example. So Tamar,
can you hear me?
Yay!
Right. I was just wondering, Graham,
yes,
that if housing associations used the affordability calculator, that in a way be more transparent to tenants looking at how, for instance, they've arrived at the decision to increase the rent to a certain. Because, for instance, I'm a member of Carto. I've never heard about this affordability calculator. We just get a letter saying this is the proposal, and it's almost like you don't have a say. It's happening on April the 1st. But if these housing associations, I don't know, spell out in a way how this affordability position came to be, and the organisation who produces this affordability calculator, then I think tenants would get more involved.
Well, yes, I'm surprised as somebody who worked for a housing association for many years to hear you saying that your experience is just of being told what the increase is going to be, because that really doesn't sound like anything like what they should be doing. There should be a process of consultation that starts, that gives you information, and then at the end of that process tells you how your views have been taken into account in making a decision. And it sounds like that's not happening for you, which is...
no, they have a consultation, but it's more done, I think, at board and meeting level. The tenants get a letter, it's a little discussion in Carto, and then all of a sudden it's announced, this is what the rent's going to be. But I don't think enough tenants get in.
Yeah.
And they say.
Yeah. Well, as I say, that still sounds like quite a long way from a good process that's reaching out and involving people in a dialogue. It sounds like a pretty brief, tick box exercise. Anna, you have your hand up.
Yes. His Fife Council is our landlord. Can you hear me?
Oh, Anna. Oh, Anne, sorry, it was Anna Johnson. So, Anne, keep going. Yeah, you go on, and then we can have
going,
Anna
We'll come back to you. Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, you're fine.
Go on, carry on.
I don't know how to put my hand up. We usually get given the consultation with 3 choices. Sometimes it's multiples of the same 3 choices, like it would be a 2% increase for 1 year, a 2% increase for 5 years, or a whatever increase for whatever. But what I've discovered is that the majority of tenants think it's the council that's putting the rent up, when it's actually the elected members that make the decision. And that's where I think a lot of it, and they think, well, there's no point in me saying anything because they never pay any attention anyway. I mean, we're lucky this year. It's going to be either a 0 or a 1.5% increase. So sorry for interrupting.
That's all right. Yeah, well, you're quite right, of course. I mean, at the end of the day, it is the elected members of the council that make the decision. They are the council, you know, so they can't say it's nothing to do with them, because it very much is.
But your ordinary tenant sees housing officers, head of housing, as the council instead. That it's an information thing, I think, that needs to be spread about.
Thank you, Anne. Anna, do you want to go now?
Anna, you're muted.
There we go. Just in the area where I live in Stirling, we have 5 different landlords, 3 housing associations and Stirling Council and private landlord. And I know that one of these particular housing associations, I don't know about last year, but the year before, they did no consultation whatsoever with their tenants here. The first the tenants knew was a letter saying on the 1st of April, your rent is going to be such and such. Somebody told me this, so I actually went and checked with the guy who's chair of our community council, who happens to be a tenant of that housing association. And he backed that up, that the first he knew about rents going up with this housing association was when he got a letter saying your rent is going to be X amount from the 1st of April. So, I mean, not every housing association is, it's only 1 out of 4 landlords that are down here.
That's against the law, Anna.
Yes.
Oh, I told them, and I gave them the housing regulator's telephone number and address, and I thought, I can't do anything about it. But there you go, there's the information you need.
Yeah,
But
it's against the law.
No,
Yeah.
I know that. Sorry,
what I was going to say, to me that sounds like a significant performance failure. You know, to fail to consult on such an important thing sounds like a significant performance failure to me.
They're a dreadful landlord, they really are. Anyway, that's my monologue.
Yes. We have Lisa and then Anne.
Just to let you know, Colin's put a comment in the comments box. Don't know if you saw it.
I'm not seeing anything on my chat. Oh yes. Colin says, I'll read this out. Colin says his microphone's not working. He apologizes for that. He's picking up on Ron's point. He says, I think we need to be careful not to get too hung up about the definition and the use of affordability tools. It's useful to ensure the issue is seen as important and useful to compare the affordability of different types of house that we have. It made it clear to us that the rents on our 2 apartments were less affordable, particularly if there was only a single income. That's a good point, Colin. Thanks very much. Yes, So yeah, I mean, that's, I think, bringing out the point that different households will experience different pressures in terms of affordability, and the way a landlord profiles their rents, the difference between what they charge for a small property and what they charge for a big property. You know, does that relate to the incomes of the houses, the households that are occupying those type of properties, or not? Thanks for that, Colin.
The last question from Anne Rocks. Graham?
Yes, indeed. Anne, you want to go ahead?
If the landlord is not consulting the tenants, I'm assuming every landlord, irrespective of whether a housing association, a council or whatever, have to do a report on the charter.
Yeah, that's right.
So that the tenants of that association should be able to see whether or not they're saying that they've been consulted.
Yeah, well, yes, that's right. I mean, every landlord's annual assurance statement is published on the regulator's website, and it's there for tenants to see. Probably not the information that's gone into preparing that, but you know, if the if the council or the landlord is publishing an assurance statement and says, you know, we are assured we are complying with the regulations, and you have evidence that they're not, then, you know, I think that's something that you need to go back to your landlord with and say, you know, we're not happy with the level of consultation that's taking place. Because it definitely should be there and it should be documented.
Okay. So thanks for that, Graham.
Thank you very much.
Nodding heads, lots of different points coming out. It is a really difficult one, and I think Graham's tackled it really well, because it's a minefield. So thank you for that, Graham.
Thank you very much.
I think the one thing that just very briefly springs to mind is that I think one thing those tenants might have to check, Anna, is that sometimes landlords have asked permission of tenants to do a 3-year rent rise. So if they'd had the letter out to say, this year your rent's going to be blah, then I would check back to make sure that they have not already agreed to, without realising it, a 3-year rent rise. But anyway, we'll own away. Thank you for coming along to our disco chat. Wasn't much dancing, so I don't think I've lost much weight at this chat.
Thank you,
so
Graham.
Lisa is going to be, Lisa, you can see here, I can see Lisa, is going to be doing the next one on the 17th of February. Again, a short one, and that's on hints and tips about working from home, a new experience for tenants and for landlords. And it's basically, how do you keep yourself okay when you're staring at a screen for the rest of the day? And my secret is to have 2 lipsticks at the side of my desk, just in case I get an emergency call, and I look the part. The next webinar we have is on the 25th of February, and that's AbilityNet are going to be doing, the webinars are a bit longer, and that's about staying safe online. My lipstick's gumming my lips together. It's obviously a poor quality, cheap lipstick that I've got there today. So it's about staying safe online. And if you keep an eye on our website, our lovely jazzy new website, you'll see all the different various sessions that we have. So without any further ado, if anyone's got any other questions, just drop us an email. And thanks again for coming along. And I was going to say safe home, but safely turn off your equipment, and I'll see you at the next one. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Graham.
Thanks, Graham.
Thank you. Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye.
Thank you. There's a nice message there, Graham.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Name.